In recent years, there are more and more debates about whatever there is a gap between the wages of males and females in the workplace. And if there is an actual gap, is it based on the performance or does it happen if it happens because of stereotypes and biases? But before we start, let's talk a little bit about the history. For most of the written history, agriculture was a major occupation that humans participated in. Females had an active role in the process of gathering and carrying resources around the field, water, wood, etc., and made food for the house. Only in the 18th century, working for salary became thing. Men, women, and young children were to be found doing all tasks, including the hardest physical labor. Due to regulations and government interventions, women stopped to work at this kind of job, and by the 19th century they found themselves mainly in the textile factories or any kind of piecework activity that involved needlework. Women in general worked for 14 hours a day. They had to work because back then there wasn't any insurance facility that would help them in case their husband would find himself unable to financially support his family. In the 20th century, women was regarded as the guardian of morality. They were seen as possessing a finer nature than men and were expected to act as such. The rule wasn't to making money, but to hold to their innocence until the right man came along so they could start a family. But at the same time, more and more universities started to accept women as students. It's pretty interesting to think about the huge shift that happened in the 20th century. Is it because of the regulation that was made at the 18th century, or maybe all of the war and the evil acts that humanity experienced, the death that was blooming in the 20th century made this shift in our brain? Or maybe it's a lot of other factors and events that made this change. I will let you decide on your own. History is all cool and fun, but what is happening now? Is there any wage gap now? There are a lot of experts that are arguing about this exact topic. Let's try to find out, based on empirical data, what is true. Based on AAUW research, in the USA, women making in general 83% of what men are earning and have only 70% of what men do in retirement. They also noted that 15 out of 20 highest paying jobs are dominated by men, while 14 out of 20 lowest paying jobs are dominated by women, and women with a bachelor's degree that are working full-time jobs are paid 26% less than their male counterparts. You can always enter their site and look into all the different statistics that they are presenting. The biggest problem with this kind of statistics is that they don't really help in any way other than triggering emotional reaction from the reader. We don't know anything about the actual occupation, the average working day, and the career choice that each gender tend to statistically select if there are any at all. Too much information is lacking, because now, unlike as in history, we have a full choice over our job selection process, as long as we are capable of it. I'm not saying that this kind of statistics are wrong, but it is very easy to manipulate to one advantage. For example, let's say that we have a group of 10 women and 10 men with equal sum of salary, which means that woman number 1 paid the same as man number 1, and so on. And as the number increases, the salary increases, which means that the salary of woman number 1 is less than woman number 2. In many scenarios of this example, we can say that the average salary of the group of men is higher than the median salary of this group of women, which sounds pretty unfair. But again, there are three kinds of lies: lies, big lies, and statistics. On the other hand, you can't argue with the truth. Women are getting paid less than men are. PEW Research Team wrote that much of this gap has been explained by measurable factors, such as educational attainment, occupational segregation, and work experience. The narrowing of the gap in recent years is attributed in large part to changes women have made in each of these dimensions. Even so, women have increased their presence in higher paying jobs traditionally dominated by men. Women as well continue to be overrepresented in lower paying occupations relative to their share of the workforce. This might contribute to the gender difference in pay. They also mention that as long as social norms force women to take on most of the house and childcare duties, and men to spend more time working as the breadwinner for the family, the domestic burden on women, including mothers, will not decrease, and their participation in labor activities will not become more active, according to experts of International Organization Labor. For example, in Russia, women spend at least 3 times more than men do domestic work, but in the USA, women spend 5 hours per day on average on household, while men spend almost 4 hours. A paper named The Gender Pay Gap in Congressional Office shows that in American Congress there is a real and huge pay gap of 11 to 12% between females and males office staff. The paper also mentioned that if experience is taken into account, the pay gap still exists but fall under 3.5%, if I calculated it correctly. This paper also mentioned that they can clearly see that the wage gap is reducing over time. It's very interesting to note that by just looking at the data, it is notable that there are not a lot of experienced women there. Teacher Pension and Bellwether published a paper based on a survey that they performed that indicates that in public schools, female teachers are getting paid less than male, reaching the range of 1 to 6% based on different kinds of teachers. But this paper also noted that within administrative positions, women tend to have higher salaries than their male colleagues by the exact same percentage. Also, it's important to remember that there are much more female teachers than male, so there might be biases based just on the fact that there is no equal amount of workforce. For example, it might be that a teacher is not a high-paying job, so it's less desirable for men to occupy. So if a male decides to work in this field, he has a lot of passion to it. I'm not saying that this statement is true. I'm explaining why there might be biases in an uneven statistical sample. A very interesting survey of programmers, which was conducted on Kaggle and had 24K response, showed that in the data science community, there is no wage gap between low experience positions. But as the years go by and the experience accumulated, the gap gets wider and wider, but it also mentions that there is a very low count of women within 15 plus years of experience. In India, by the way, no pay gap could be found. Another survey between lawyers shows that the female lawyers earn 15% less on average than their male counterparts, but at the same time their distribution is not equal between the different majors. More so, another survey showed that men on average work 46 hours a week, while women work only 42 hours a week when they are childless, which child is turning into 37 hours a week. This study also mentioned that women sleep more than men by 5 hours a week. In all these examples, and multiple more that I didn't mention, regardless of the reason, we can see some patterns. Women do get paid less than men on average. Men, in general, have somehow more experience on average than females, which, to be honest, is a mystery to me. Because it's not talking about women in general, it's talking about men and women in some occupation after they study and work out to get to some kind of position. And in some occupation, it's hard to find women with more than 15 years of experience, which is just a little bit crazy. And in general, men tend to work in higher paid jobs, whatever they choose their occupation based on the salary or the industry that is dominated by men generate more income, or maybe other factors are involved. Laura Tyson, professor at Berkeley, trying to explain the situation. First of all, she argues that until recently there were big differences between education levels of male and female, and we can see the influence of past decades on today's salary statistics. Also, women choose different occupations than men, so gender difference in occupational choice affect gender difference in earning. Moreover, even within high-paying occupations, women tend to be employed at lower levels of that occupational hierarchy. In addition to that, she is saying that women around the world are also more likely than men to work part-time jobs. There is also some evidence of wage penalty for motherhood, while a premium wage for fatherhood exists. To be honest, this kind of phenomena is pretty interesting to me, so I tried pretty hard to find some empirical explanation or some statistics that will explain this stuff, and I didn't manage to find any. So if you know or you think you know why it's happening, feel free to leave a comment and explain it to me. And I want you to keep in mind her final conclusion. She stated that when you compare men and women with comparable education at the beginning of their career, working full-time job in the same occupation and sector, the gender gap in earning has largely disappeared in many advanced industrial economies. Same education, same work, same wage. And this is, for me, the most important statement of this video, because as long as we have our freedom to make our own choice and we have the same opportunities, our life and our accomplishment is our alone. And anyone who wants, whatever it is, a boy or a girl, can become the best in his sector, a leading figure, as long as he is willing to sacrifice what others don't, and become the best of the best. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe to my channel so we could be able to meet again in the future.